Gentlemen, excellent to be back with you on MGTOW Money. Today's topic, this doesn't have to be you. Before we get to that, thank you to the newest Patreon supporters of this channel. Welcome, Running Out of Time. Nice screen name that's especially appropriate for today's topic, as you'll soon see. Men, see the video description today. Become a Patreon supporter of this channel now, because this channel is bringing value to you. Today's topic came straight from a CNBC article, and specifically, of course, it is This Doesn't Have to Be You, where they were surveying millennials, and 1 of 8 millennials is saying basically, I'm going to work until I die. And approximately a third of those millennials, and these are young people in their late teens to early 30s that are saying, about a third of them are saying they're going to work to at least they're 70. Men, this doesn't have to be you. Now, despite there being record levels in the United States, but this applies across the Western world of credit card debt, college debt, car debt, I'm talking about auto loans, and now totaling those 3 categories, the 3 C's, credit cards, college, cars, totaling about $4.5 trillion. I said with a T, trillion dollars. Yes, I know many of you probably are drowning in debt. This doesn't have to be you. Listen up carefully. 1, you need to very early in life ideally completely avoid these things, or at least eliminate them as quickly as you possibly can. I mean, as soon as possible. You need to aggressively pay this stuff off. As I used to hear from my grandparents, who of course were children of the Depression, if you can't pay cash, you can't afford it. The only thing they ever bought on both sides of my family were property. That's it. Everything else they strictly paid cash for. Everything was on a cash basis. Don't be like me when I was a kid, when I was a young man, if you will, where I'm paying 25% credit card interest. And oh, by the way, I was also paying late fees, etc. Men, avoid this type of activity. Avoid. Again, as I've mentioned before, in my opinion, it takes a high degree of financial intelligence, specifically discipline, that most people don't have. And I don't mean this in a bad way, but the point is that you need to be careful with taking on any sort of debt, because most of us, if nothing else, as human beings, we just do not have the discipline to deal with it. 2, start planning your retirement based around, in my opinion, that you will continue to work. But let me be specific. I'm not talking about working a typical 9-to-5 job. I'm talking about working contract work, seasonal work, temp work, gig work, whatever. But start anticipating that you'll do something to supplement your income, especially if you're a man seeking early retirement, as you probably are. If you're seeking to get out of the 9-to-5 rat race, if you will, if you're seeking to get into some sort of part-time retirement, if you will, whether that be doing some sort of Amazon warehouse seasonal work, or doing retail seasonal jobs that I used to do when I was very, very young, or doing temp work. Again, I can remember years ago, I used to go to I went to a temp agency, and they used to assign me, for example, to work at a trade show. So I'd go to a convention center, and I would work at a trade show booth and hand out brochures and try to answer questions as best I could, etc. This is the type of work that you can do that ultimately can be a key supplement to your income, to a man that is seeking to have what I would call a half-speed retirement. You do not have to work until you're 70. You do not have to be going to your job until you die. 3, I've mentioned this numerous times before. I highly recommend that men consider moving overseas. Oh, I know that gets outrageous to some of you. And I know one of the most hated videos that I've ever done was the idea of that some men should not move overseas, but some should consider it. Even if you don't want to take that step of moving overseas, despite, I can promise you, you won't die. And many commenters have already mentioned that they live overseas. I know that more than one commenter has said, for example, they live in Thailand. One commenter commenter has said that they live in the Philippines. I think a couple of commenters have said they live in various South American countries. The point is, even in your home country, and for example, I'll just use the United States because I'm most knowledgeable about that, I am fairly sure that there are rural parts, in other words, sort of out in the sticks, out in the woods parts, small towns, etc., where the cost of living is much, much less than probably where you're living. So the point is, if you really don't feel comfortable moving overseas, then consider moving to a small town. Consider moving to a cheaper area. Consider moving to an area, for example, that maybe a small college town, for example, or something like that, where you can live a reasonable standard of living that doesn't have a high expense ratio associated with it. So again, you don't have to necessarily plan on going to your office and dying at your desk. For those men, though, that are a little bit adventurous, that have a slightly open mind, they might consider, if nothing else, taking a week or two vacation in places like Ecuador, Colombia, Mexico, which of course is just across the U.S. border, going to the Philippines or Thailand. I promise you won't die. I promise you will be okay. You will come back. And you know what? You might actually say, hey, I actually like this. The point is, men, you can get a decent standard of living on relatively small amount of money, again, in these types of areas. Lastly, what you're looking for, men, is to set up a bridge between stopping your full-time work, your 40-hour work that I know many of you probably hate, to your government pension. So let's just use round numbers. Let's say I'm shooting for age 50, that I want to walk away, and I know my government pension kicks in at 62, for example. In the United States, yes, as of today, you can qualify for Social Security at 62. I know in other countries it's higher. I believe, for example, in Australia, it's all the way up to 67. But the point is that you are looking at this as a bridge to getting to your government pension. So again, going back to that example, if I'm an American and I'm shooting to, let me see if I can just make it to 50 or so, maybe my lower 50s, and then qualify for Social Security, then you can sort of take a step back, you can relax, etc. You can have that half-speed retirement that I'm talking about. You can have a tremendous amount of free time where you're deciding to do the work that you want, with whom you want, where you want. Because presumably, that's your goal in life, where you have control, where you have lots and lots of options. Quick summary, you do not have to work until you're dead. You can get out of the 9-to-5 workforce if you choose to at a relatively young age by making some intentional decisions relatively early in your life. And if you're a MGTOW in particular, you have the best odds of doing so. You can make the choices about your life that you want to. You can, of course, avoid the 3 C's that I was just talking about: credit card debt, college debt, and cars. It's going to be a lot easier, I can assure you, men, if you're a MGTOW, to avoid these things, because again, you're going to have less influence, frankly, from another person. You'll be able to make your own decisions with a relatively clear head. Finally, for the man who says, quote unquote, I love my job, I say to them, keep doing it, brother. I'm not joining you. I'm going my own way. Gentlemen, hit the like button if you found this profitable. John Galt, out.